His skin felt like it was burning, but strangely, his soul felt colder than ice. At that moment, he had only one wish. Please, take me away from this burning volcano and this endless ocean before the last trace of moonlight disappears. Rain quietly poured over the empty street as a lonely figure stood under the dim sky, completely motionless, as if the world around him had frozen in time. But that wasn't the beginning of the story. To understand what happened that night, we have to go back a little. The young man's name is Ki, a 19-year-old second-year university student who, since childhood, had lived with his grandfather learning the traditional craft of lacquer art. And even now he spends most of his time carefully polishing and finishing handmade pieces. However, because of the materials he constantly works with, his hands often break out in painful red reactions. Yet he never stopped, because it was the only skill his grandfather had passed down to him. But Ki also had another strange problem. When he visited the doctor, the diagnosis shocked him. His body couldn't build a proper immune response, which meant even basic treatments barely worked on him, making his body unusually fragile. One evening, while Ki was quietly working in his shop, the door suddenly opened and the strange man he had rescued from the roadside not long ago stepped inside. The man had long blue hair, sharp eyes, and strangely pointed ears, looking like someone who didn't belong to this world. Yet somehow Ki had taken him in. The mysterious man calmly looked at him and said only one thing. "I'm hungry." Ki sighed and replied, "You just ate not long ago." But the stranger didn't seem to care. Instead, he suddenly leaned closer and grabbed Ki's arm. Ki was startled as the man's deep gaze focused on the red irritation that had appeared again on Ki's skin. And without hesitation, the blue-haired stranger gently lifted his hand. Before Ki could react, the man slowly brought the hand closer and said, "I'll help you." Ki's eyes widened in shock as he said, "Wait, don't." But the strange man simply smiled faintly and replied, "I can make you feel better," before quietly adding, "After all, earlier, you seemed to enjoy it." Ki froze. Earlier? What exactly happened before this? And who, or what, is this mysterious man? That question would soon change Ki's entire life, because this is only the beginning of their strange story. And Ki still doesn't realize that the man he brought home might not be human. Ki tried to push the man away, his fingers gripping the other's shirt as he whispered weakly, "Stop. That's enough." His breath trembled, his face burning red, as if his entire body was overwhelmed by a strange sensation he couldn't explain. But the blue-haired stranger leaned closer, his voice calm yet firm. "Not yet," he murmured softly, his cool breath brushing against Ki's ear. "There's still a deeper place that needs treatment." Ki's eyes widened in panic as he struggled to hold on. "Wait, please. Stop." But the man only replied quietly, "This is my method. It must spread through your entire body. Otherwise it won't work." Ki's breathing became uneven as the strange warmth continued spreading through him, making it harder for him to resist. "No, that's enough. Please," he pleaded. But the blue-haired man simply whispered back, "That won't be enough." The room grew silent except for Ki's trembling breaths. Finally, when Ki could barely think straight anymore, the blue-haired man calmly said, "Anyway, your allergic reaction. Only I can cure it." The words hung quietly in the air, leaving Ki frozen in place, realizing that the mysterious man he had rescued might be the only person capable of saving him. In the beginning of the chapter, one rainy evening, Ki hurried across the campus corridor, his hoodie soaked from the heavy rain and his breathing uneven as if he had been running for a long time. Stopping near a building, he asked a passerby politely, "Excuse me, where is the green bamboo studio office?" The woman pointed down the hallway and replied, "It's at the end of the corridor." "Thank you," Ki answered quietly before continuing forward. But as he walked past the window, he suddenly paused, looking at his own hand. Ki noticed the red marks spreading across his skin again. Inside the room nearby, a few students were chatting casually, and one of them glanced outside and whispered to the others, "Doesn't Ki seem kind of scary?" Another student replied, "Yeah, he's always alone, and those red spots all over his body Make him look strange. Hey, third student added quietly. His hands are swollen and red again. Maybe it's some kind of illness. Someone else continued the gossip. I heard he lives in that old house near the woods. People say anyone who passes by there feels uncomfortable. Their voices were low, but Ku-ki could hear everything clearly. Standing alone outside the door, he remained silent. Then he forced a faint smile to himself and muttered quietly, "Could it be that ghosts really exist in this building?" Just then another voice suddenly interrupted. "That's enough." Inside the room, a tall young man with reddish hair looked at the others with a serious expression and said, "Stop saying things like that. You're going too far." Ku-ki froze when he heard that voice, his eyes widening slightly as he thought, "That voice. It's Li Tun." Inside the room, the others quickly tried to explain themselves. "Come on, we were just joking." But one of them laughed and continued teasing. "Hey Li Tun, why do you always defend him? We invited you to join us for the group assignment and dinner, but you keep bringing Ku-ki along too." Another student smirked and added jokingly, "Don't tell me you're actually interested in him or something?" Ku-ki's eyes trembled when he heard that, and for a moment he stood there in silence. Then suddenly, from inside the room, Li Tun's voice came out sharply. "Stop saying such disgusting nonsense." At that exact moment, Ku-ki's eyes widened in shock, something about those words striking him deeply, and for a brief second it felt like the entire world around him had gone silent. Li Tun looked at the others with a serious expression and reminded them to focus on the assignment that had to be submitted next week, instead of talking nonsense. And hearing his tone, the others quickly backed down and apologized, saying they didn't mean to make things unpleasant. But outside the room, Ku-ki had already heard enough. The words disgusting and nauseating echoed in his mind, and as the voices repeated in his head, "Just look at him. He's really creepy. It makes me sick." Ku-ki's eyes trembled and his breathing grew heavier, trying to clear his thoughts. Inside a nearby restaurant, the television was broadcasting the news, talking about how several areas of the city would experience showers tonight and mentioning the rare sight of a blood-red moon covering Pluto in the night sky, while the anchor explained that since 2006, the International Astronomical Union had removed Pluto from the list of planets in the solar system, reclassifying the distant cold celestial body as a dwarf planet. Nearby, a child curiously asked his mother why Pluto had been abandoned like that, and the mother gently replied that it must feel lonely to be left behind, while another person casually added that it simply didn't meet the standard set by astronomers. Standing quietly near the entrance, Ku-ki listened to the conversation absent-mindedly until a waitress approached and politely said, "Excuse me, could you step aside? We're serving food here." Ku-ki nodded slightly and moved away from the doorway. Just as the door opened behind him, Li Tun, who had been inside with the others, suddenly turned his head toward the entrance. The moment he saw the figure in the hoodie, his eyes widened with surprise. "Ku-ki," he called out, but before Li Tun could reach him, Ku-ki had already turned and rushed down the steps into the rain. Li Tun immediately ran after him, shouting loudly, "Ku-ki," as the sound of the rain grew heavier and Ku-ki disappeared into the night. In the pouring rain, Ku-ki suddenly stopped in the middle of the empty road, the sound of raindrops hitting the ground echoing around him as he stood there quietly, his soaked hoodie clinging to his body. Looking down at the wet pavement, he thought to himself that situations like this should have been something he got used to a long time ago, yet even now he still couldn't feel indifferent about it. Up until this moment, he had never truly felt like he was any different from everyone else. But before he could gather his thoughts, the bright headlights of a pickup truck suddenly cut through the rain and rushed toward him. Startled, Ku-ki stumbled back as the vehicle screeched past, and the driver angrily shouted from the window, "Standing there like that, are you trying to get yourself killed?" The truck sped away into the storm. He looked down at his hand, noticing the red irritation spreading across his skin, and quietly muttered to himself, "Tisk." Just then, something unexpected happened. With a soft tap, something small suddenly fell from the back of the departing truck and landed on the wet road nearby. Ku-ki blinked in surprise, staring at the strange object lying a short distance away. It looked like a colorful shell, glistening under the rain as if it had just fallen from somewhere unusual. Curious, Kuki slowly reached out and picked it up, studying its smooth surface as it reflected the dim light around him. "It's glowing," he murmured softly, wondering if it was some kind of old shell or strange stone. At that very moment, high above the dark sky, a massive crimson moon slowly appeared through the clouds, its eerie red light shining down on the quiet road. Under that mysterious glow, Kuki sat alone in the rain, holding the strange shell in his hand, completely unaware that this small and unexpected encounter was about to change his life forever. As Kuki held the strange shell in his hand under the crimson moon, something suddenly changed. The world around him seemed to darken, and in his mind, terrifying voices began echoing from the past. Shadowy figures surrounded him in a sea of red darkness, their silhouettes whispering cruel words. "Stay away from him, that wild thing," one voice shouted. Another followed. "Everyone who sees him feels disgusted." The voices grew louder and harsher, piling on top of each other. "So annoying. Just disappear already. Go dot." The words struck Kuki like sharp blades. Overwhelmed, he clutched his head tightly as if trying to block them out. His entire body felt like it was burning from the inside, and he gasped weakly, whispering to himself, "It hurts. My whole body feels like it's on fire. I can't breathe anymore." Then suddenly, through the chaos, he sensed something different. "Someone is coming," he murmured faintly. The burning sensation twisted inside him, making him feel dizzy and nauseous. In desperation, Kuki stretched his hand forward into the darkness and whispered, "Please, help me." But instead of relief, everything around him seemed to collapse into a deep, black void, swallowing his consciousness. When Kuki slowly regained awareness, he felt something cold surrounding him. Water dripped down his skin as if he had been submerged somewhere deep and silent. Confused, he whispered weakly, "Water." A shiver ran through his body. "It's so cold." Yet strangely, as the cool sensation spread through him, the intense burning pain that had been tormenting him moments ago began to fade away. His breathing gradually steadied, and a quiet thought crossed his mind. The unbearable pain that had consumed his body had suddenly disappeared, but something else replaced it. A strange warmth spread through him, unfamiliar yet strangely comforting. Half conscious, Kuki murmured softly, "It's not enough. I want more." The strange sensation grew stronger, making his thoughts blur together. "More? I need more," he whispered again, almost as if speaking to someone nearby. His breathing grew heavier as the mysterious presence seemed to respond, drawing closer in the darkness. Then Kuki suddenly realized something and muttered weakly, "No, wait there. You can't." His words trailed off as his mind struggled to stay awake. A low sound escaped his lips as the strange feeling overwhelmed his senses. Just as his consciousness began slipping away again, a calm voice suddenly spoke near him. "Open your eyes." Kuki's vision slowly cleared, and when he finally focused, he saw a tall figure leaning over him. Long blue hair flowed down like water, and pointed ears peeked through the strands. The man's sharp eyes calmly observed him from above. Kuki froze for a moment, completely stunned by the sight of the mysterious stranger hovering over him. His voice trembled as he finally managed to speak. "Who are you?" Kuki stared in shock at the mysterious man leaning over him. The stranger's long blue hair fell like flowing water, and his sharp golden eyes calmly observed him. For a moment, Kuki's mind completely froze. His heart pounded as he instinctively pushed the stranger away, creating some distance between them. Still breathing heavily, he demanded again, "Who exactly are you?" His voice was tense and confused. After all, it was the middle of the night, and somehow this strange person had suddenly appeared inside his house. "What are you doing in my house in the middle of the night?" he asked firmly. The blue-haired man slowly straightened his posture and stepped onto the floor. His movements were calm, almost elegant, as if the situation around him didn't concern him at all. The room was quiet except for the faint sound of water dripping from the man's long hair. Kuki couldn't help but feel uneasy. Something about this stranger felt completely unnatural. As the man approached, Kuki instinctively stepped back again, muttering under his breath in frustration and disbelief. Then, nervously, he asked, exactly do you want?" Instead of answering immediately, the blue-haired man lifted his hand and pointed toward the open window. Soft, glowing particles floated in the air as a gentle breeze moved the curtains. Ku-ki followed the direction of the gesture, and his eyes widened when he saw the strange shell resting near the window. It was the same colorful shell he had picked up earlier on the rainy road. The surface of the shell shimmered faintly under the light, as if it held some mysterious power. The blue-haired man spoke calmly, his voice steady and confident. "That is me." Ku-ki blinked in confusion, staring back and forth between the man and the shell. "Wait, what?" he muttered, clearly struggling to understand. In his mind, the pieces slowly began to connect. Earlier that night, he had picked up that strange shell from the road. Now suddenly, a mysterious man had appeared in his room, pointing directly at it. Still confused, Ku-ki hesitated before asking the question that had formed in his mind. "Don't tell me. You're some kind of sea snail, spirit or something." The blue-haired man looked at him quietly, for a moment before giving a faint response. "You can think of it that way if you want." Ku-ki froze. His eyes widened as his brain struggled to process what he had just heard. For a few seconds, he simply stared at the man, completely speechless, his mind filled with disbelief and confusion. The situation felt so unreal that he couldn't even tell whether he was still dreaming, or if something truly strange had just entered his life. Ku-ki stared at the mysterious blue-haired stranger standing in his room, his heart pounding as confusion and fear mixed together. Raising his voice nervously, he shouted, "I don't care what you are. Just leave my house right now. If you don't, I'll call the police." Even as he said those words, sweat ran down his face. In his mind, the situation felt completely unbelievable. A sea snail spirit? That sounded ridiculous. Even a child wouldn't believe something like that. Ku-ki tried to calm himself by observing the stranger more carefully. The man's pointed ears. Maybe they were just fake accessories. His long blue hair. Maybe it was just a wig. And the strange clothing and jewelry he wore probably meant he simply liked dressing in unusual costumes. Yes, that had to be it. Ku-ki convinced himself that the man was probably just someone eccentric, playing some strange role. But then the blue-haired man suddenly spoke in a calm voice. "I'm hungry." Ku-ki blinked in confusion. "Huh, what?" The man repeated it plainly. "Give me food. I want to eat." For a moment, Ku-ki could only stare at him, completely caught off guard. After all the strange things that had just happened, this mysterious person was simply asking for food, trying to keep the situation under control. Ku-ki forced himself to stay calm and replied cautiously, "Fine, if you eat and then leave, that's good enough." In his mind, however, he thought something very different. This guy must have some kind of delusion, talking about spirits and strange things like that. If he argued with him, it might only make the situation worse. The safest way was to just cooperate and send him away peacefully without causing trouble. Trying to reason with him, Ku-ki stepped closer and said, "If you're really some kind of sea snail spirit, then shouldn't you be able to return to your shell? Why don't you just go back into it so I can take you to the sea?" The blue-haired man looked down at his hands, his expression turning slightly uncertain. "I don't know how to go back," he admitted quietly. Ku-ki blinked in surprise. "Then how did you come out in the first place?" The stranger paused, thinking carefully before answering. "I don't know." He slowly raised his hand, staring at it as tiny glowing blue particles appeared around his fingers, floating gently in the air like small lights. The man looked slightly confused himself and said, "This is also the first time I've taken this form." Seeing those glowing lights appear out of nowhere made Ku-ki's eyes widen. His mind raced. Those lights, they suddenly appeared. Could it be? This man was actually telling the truth? Could he really be some kind of sea creature spirit? Before Ku-ki could fully process the thought, the blue-haired man stepped closer and suddenly lifted his hand, gently holding Ku-ki's chin between his fingers. Ku-ki froze in place, startled by the sudden contact. Looking closely at Ku-ki's neck and skin, the man asked calmly, "Are these marks on your body?" Ku-ki quickly protested, "No, let go of me." Embarrassed and flustered, he tried to push the stranger's hand away. "And they're not marks like that either. It's just a skin allergy." The blue-haired man tilted his head slightly, still studying him. "An allergy?" he repeated softly, ignoring Ku-ki's resistance. The stranger reached out and gently brushed his fingers across the irritated patch on Ku Ki's arm. Ku Ki immediately stiffened, a small shiver running through his body as he instinctively pulled back. Watching him carefully, the blue-haired man asked in a calm voice, "Do these marks make you uncomfortable?" Ku Ki stood there breathing nervously, unsure how to respond as the strange man continued observing him with those mysterious eyes. And just like that, the tension in the room quietly grew heavier, leaving Ku Ki wondering whether the unbelievable encounter in front of him was truly real, or if this mysterious stranger would soon reveal something even more surprising. Ku Ki quickly pulled his arm back and said firmly, "That has nothing to do with you." The room fell quiet for a moment, but suddenly his phone began vibrating loudly on the table. The screen lit up as the phone rang again and again, showing that it was already 2:30 in the morning. Ku Ki walked over and picked it up, while the blue-haired stranger stood silently behind him. Looking at the screen, Ku Ki sighed as he thought about his responsibilities. In his mind, he calculated the work he still had to do. In about 6 hours, he would need to deliver an order to one of his grandfather's regular customers, and the lacquer piece he was preparing still needed another round of polishing. Realizing how little time he had left to rest, he knew he shouldn't stay awake any longer. Without answering the call, he pressed the decline button and the ringing finally stopped. As the screen dimmed, a message notification appeared. It was from Li Tun. The message apologized for what happened earlier and explained that the others didn't know about Ku Ki's allergic condition. Li Tun asked if they could meet tomorrow to talk. Ku Ki stared at the message silently for a moment, his eyes showing exhaustion more than anything else. Instead of replying, he slowly turned the phone screen off and muttered quietly, "I'm too tired." Standing there in the quiet room, he glanced toward the strange, blue-haired man and thought to himself that he truly didn't have the energy to argue with this bizarre guest any longer. After everything that had happened tonight, he felt completely drained. Covering his face with one hand, he let out a long breath and thought bitterly that someone like him, who already had so many problems, didn't have the strength to worry about anything else. "Whatever," he muttered under his breath. Suddenly, he grabbed a small container of snacks from the table and dropped it in front of the blue-haired man with a soft thump. Then he spoke in a serious tone, laying down strict rules. "You can stay here for one night, but don't touch anything in this room." Ku Ki pointed around the house to make it clear he meant it. "When morning comes, you leave immediately. I don't care what you are. Just go somewhere else once the sun rises." With that warning, Ku Ki stepped back, hoping the strange guest would simply eat the food, stay quiet for the night, and disappear by morning so his life could finally return to normal. Ku Ki let out a tired sigh and spoke firmly before leaving the room, saying that if the strange man caused any trouble, he would throw both him and the shell back into the sea. With that warning, Ku Ki turned and shut the door behind him, the sound echoing softly through the quiet house. Left alone in the room, the mysterious blue-haired man stood silently for a moment, looking around the unfamiliar space. Sunlight slowly filtered through the window, illuminating the small table where the bag of snacks Ku Ki had dropped earlier was resting. Curious, the man picked up the bag and examined it carefully, clearly unfamiliar with such a simple human item. After a moment, he set it aside and began walking around the room. As he moved, faint blue particles of light shimmered gently around his hand, floating in the air like tiny sparks. His attention was soon drawn to a small photo frame resting on a nearby table. With a quiet motion, he lifted it and looked at the picture inside. The photograph showed Ku Ki standing beside an older man, both of them smiling gently while a small dog sat in front of them. The blue-haired stranger stared at the image silently, as if trying to understand the connection between the people in the photo. The peaceful moment slowly shifted as the story moved into Ku Ki's memories. In the next scene, Ku Ki could be seen, standing in a workshop, beside an older craftsman who was patiently explaining the delicate process of making lacquerware. The elderly man carefully pointed to a tea set placed on the table and explained that for this 6-piece tea set, every piece except the container and the spoon must be coated with lacquer. Without the protective lacquer layer, even the smallest flaw would be visible, which meant the polishing stage required extreme patience and attention to detail. The craftsman emphasized that the surface must be sanded carefully again and again while controlling the thickness of the lacquer layer. If the work was rushed or done without enough time, the final product would appear rough and imperfect. Listening to these words, Kuki looked troubled and quietly apologized, feeling responsible for not completing the work perfectly. However, the older man calmly reassured him and pointed out the spoon from the tea set, asking what kind of base material had been used to shape it, noting that the inside looked messy and uneven. The moment hinted that Kuki still had much to learn, while also showing the patient guidance of the older craftsman, who was teaching him the art step by step. In the workshop, the older craftswoman carefully held the lacquer piece in her hand while continuing to question Kuki about the materials he had used. Kuki calmly explained that the base of the piece was made from fragments of old sea snail shells mixed with a small amount of finely crushed artificial opal powder. He added that when someone holds the finished tea scoop in their hand, the feeling should be like holding a small piece of the ocean itself. Hearing this, the craftswoman paused and asked him why he had added artificial opal powder instead of simply using the natural sea snail shell alone. Kuki answered honestly that he wanted the reflected light to appear more vivid and sparkling. However, the woman didn't seem impressed. She questioned him again, asking why he couldn't just use the natural shell directly, pointing out that mixing artificial stones into it only made the process more complicated. From her perspective, doing so felt like wasting such a precious natural material. Kuki hesitated for a moment before quietly explaining the real problem. In recent years, the sea snail shells they used had become restricted and could no longer be harvested freely. Because of that, finding the raw materials had become extremely difficult. The woman immediately responded with a practical suggestion, saying that if the materials were difficult to obtain locally, they could simply be purchased from abroad or through other supply channels, and that it didn't necessarily have to be so complicated. She even warned Kuki not to inherit the stubborn personality of his grandfather. Hearing his grandfather mentioned made Kuki fall silent for a moment as memories surfaced in his mind. When his grandfather was still alive, he had always insisted on polishing every piece carefully by hand, again and again, refusing to cut corners no matter how long it took. Compared to that level of dedication, Kuki knew that the smoothness and layered texture of the lacquer he produced was still far from his grandfather's standard. Looking down at the tea scoop resting on the table, he couldn't help but feel a little frustrated with himself. Seeing this hesitation, the craftswoman sighed and spoke bluntly. With Kuki's current skill level, she didn't feel confident assigning him the important commission they were discussing. As she adjusted the beautiful blue butterfly-shaped earring on her ear, her words made it clear that although Kuki had potential, he still had a long way to go before he could truly live up to the reputation of the craftsmanship his grandfather once carried. After carefully examining the piece for a long moment, the craftswoman finally spoke again and said that she would temporarily accept the tea set Kuki had made. She admitted that the golden powder design and the decorative details created using pieces of sea snail shell on the tea container did show some creativity and artistic thought. However, her expression quickly became serious again as she paused and added that there was still an important issue. Looking directly at Kuki's neck, where the red allergic marks were clearly visible, she reminded him that if he truly could not physically handle natural lacquer, then he should stop working with lacquerware altogether. Natural lacquer, she explained, is a milky white resin extracted from the bark of the lacquer tree, and when it comes into contact with air, it gradually darkens and hardens into a durable black coating. Unfortunately, this material causes strong allergic reactions in many people. She continued by saying that Kuki's grandfather had been one of the rare craftsmen who was not allergic to lacquer at all, which allowed him to polish each layer by hand with extraordinary patience. Sadly, Kuki had not inherited that same resistance, and because of that, continuing along this path would only make things harder for him. Hearing those words, Kuki lowered his eyes and remained silent, clearly conflicted between his physical limitations and the craft he wanted to pursue. The woman then turned to leave, her final words carrying a mixture of realism and disappointment, implying that sometimes talent alone is not enough when the body itself cannot endure the work. The scene then shifts to a brief educational explanation that helps viewers understand an important detail of the story. It reveals that the sea snail shell used in traditional lacquer inlay is considered a high-grade decorative material in classical lacquer art. However, in recent years this species has been placed on the National Protected Wildlife List, meaning harvesting or capturing it is now prohibited. Because of that restriction, obtaining the material has become extremely difficult for craftsmen like Ku Ki.